endangered species. But I sing no victim song. I am a woman, I am an artist, and I know where my voice belongs.
Today, everyone's eyes are on us as we rise. In this hour, it is our fine duty to find the beauty in rooting for other women so they too know we are not victims. We are victors, the greatest predictors of progress. We press for change, a new dawn drawn into the open by women whose silence is broken. We push on and act on our responsibility to bring visibility to the most vulnerable, to bring freedom to those who didn't have a choice, to bring volume to those who dare to use their voice. We don't fear the day she steps into the light because we're with women every step of the fight. We clear her way. We don't fear this day because it is her strength, her story, and her spirit which inspires other vital voices to speak up when they hear it. So let it be said that light will be shed when our world is led by leaders ahead of the headlines, the voices on the front line, these first women who stand up, knowing the wind not by where it is, but by where it is blowing, leading the world not by where it is, but where change is going. We all leap forward when one woman tries and she defies.
Good morning, good morning, good morning. How are y'all feeling this morning? Good. I welcome you to the inaugural Global Leadership Summit for Howard University. Can you please put your hands together? My name is Dr. Angerica Bean. I am the Assistant Director for the Women's Center for Gender for Gender and Global Leadership. But I want to take this time before we even get started to welcome all of the ambassadors and the dignitaries in the house. Could you please stand? If you're a dignitary or an ambassador, could you please stand? Could you please put your hands together? Thank you so much for showing up. Thank you. Thank you. They have traveled far and wide to be with us on today, so we appreciate them. Since the center's launch, I'm going to take this off because it makes me a little bit more comfortable. Since the center's launch last year, we have continued to support Black and Brown women from Howard and across the globe through partnerships and programming that amplify our mission of being a center of excellence. Here at the Youth Center, we are building up the next generation of conscious women in leadership through activism research and intentional partnerships. We are grateful for our stakeholders and amazing mentors that have supported us from our inception. And we are really grateful for all of you who make these type of moments possible, for being with us, for being here with us in person or virtually. So we're going to take this time just to do a little housekeeping before we get the program started. So the building. Okay, so to my right and to your left is an elevator and some stairs. So in case of any emergencies, feel free to go down the stairs to the first floor. Also, the restroom is through the foyer. You'll make a quick right and then a quick left. That's where the restrooms are. And then we also want to take the time to say, in terms of the middle aisle, please do not walk in the middle aisle because this is being filmed live, and we don't want to see the back of anybody's heads. So with that, we're going to take this time to welcome our Dean Richardson, for a moment of prayer. Dean Richardson.
Let us pray. Most gracious and loving God, you are the giver of every good and perfect gift. So we give you thanks for the gift of this day. We give you thanks for the gift of Howard University's Center for Women, Gender, and Global Leadership. We give you thanks for the visionary leadership of our President, Rain Frederick. We give thanks for the outstanding leadership of Dr. Dewani. We pray, oh God, that this experience together, those who are gathered in this room, will grant us more wisdom, courage, and understanding as our panel of experts grapple with the many challenges facing women in the workplace. Bless now what our eyes will see. Bless what our ears will hear. Bless what our hearts will feel as we grapple with the great issues of this day. In your name we pray. Amen.
Thank you, Dean Richardson. Next, we would like to welcome our visionary, the woman who embodies excellence, the woman who makes this thing happen, and our director, Dr. Jarpa Dewani.
Good morning, everyone here with us today, and good day to those of you watching online, wherever in the world you may be tuning in from. As mentioned, my name is Jarpa Dewani. I'm an associate professor of political science and also the director of the Center for Women, Gender, and Global Leadership. I stand on all protocols already observed by Dr. Bean, and I welcome you all to this event today. I would like to begin by a quick reflection. Today marks the one-year anniversary since the center was launched. We launched it October last year, so 2020, but we're still in the same month. And it's the first Global Leadership of Women Summit we are holding as part of our anniversary. A year ago, if you had asked me, where will the center be in 1 year? I would look at you and I would tell you I have to wait for Dr. Fauci to tell me where we will be. Because we launched the center in the midst of the pandemic. I know we are still in the pandemic, but right in the middle of the pandemic. And I had a couple of choices. One, to just slow down and wait for the pandemic to end before we begin activities, or to begin activities so that we could get our foundation set and get our name out there. I chose the latter. It was a harder one to do, but I like hard challenges. So now that we're gathering today to celebrate our 1 year anniversary, it has not been easy, but we also have reason to celebrate. So thank you all for joining us today. I would like to leave you with 3 quick reflections. 1, gratitude. I stand here today not because of who I am, because of who we are. I thank Dr. Frederick, who bought into my vision, who responded to my email and said, give me a proposal by 10 a.m. and I can get you $300,000 to do what you do, which I believe in, which is gender equality. And I thought, 300,000, that is great. I get to do good stuff. Within 12 hours, I had a proposal ready. But that proposal would have meant nothing if it hadn't gone to the next level, which was to the Marin Foundation. And I'm glad to say that today we have in our midst our founding donor, Mr. Jim Marin. Mr. and Mrs. Marin bought into the vision, which was shared to them by Dr. Frederick, and they thought, you can do with more money. We will give you $1 million. And that is how it all started. So it took a visionary and a male ally who believed in gender equality, another male ally and his family who believed in Black women's leadership to activate what we came to know today or come to know today as a center. But it didn't stop with these individuals. We couldn't have done what we've done in 1 year without the support of the Howard University community. I am grateful to Provost Anthony Wuto, who responds to every single email and every text I send him. And thankful for your leadership and guidance in getting me on this journey. We would not be here today without all the faculty, many of whom are here with us today, some who are watching online, who supported us and who bought into the vision. My colleagues are here, Dr. Anita Plummer, Dr. Bean just joined us, and many others you would see. We couldn't have made it this far without our students who support us, who volunteer their time. And I am grateful to so many other people who did not know me before the center came about, but they reached out and said, let us know how we can support you. I could keep going on a long list of people, but I start here with gratitude to the Executive Council of the Center, the Advisory Board of the Center, and the Global Council of Leaders. We have with us here the chair of our advisory board, Dr. Ladner, who we will be seeing in a few minutes. I'm also grateful that we have a member of our Global Council of Leaders, Judge Janet Nosworthy, who flew in from Jamaica to be with us today. Thank you. The second point I want to leave us with is prioritization. It's a big word. Howard is going through what we call the Howard Forward, our strategic plan put in by President Frederick. So with this 1 year of building a foundation, getting together, and going forward to do bigger things, we are beginning to go into our second year of prioritization. And thanks to our advisory board meeting last week, we have a clear vision with which to move forward into the next future. Watch out for this space. There's greater stuff coming from the Women's Center. The third point I want to leave you with is celebration. We are here today to celebrate the little gains and the big gains. And I'll end up very quickly that in as much as it may look like a cacophony, we do have things to celebrate. One, that we have a structure, we have a space, physical space, we have a website, and we have social media. That is something to celebrate about. Most importantly, we have started activating our partnerships. And I am happy to say that the Women's Center connected Howard University to UN Women. And we have a partnership, a global partnership with UN Women under their He for She campaign. That makes Howard University the first and currently the only HBCU to be part of the UN Women He for She campaign. And under this, President Frederick is the only HBCU president to be sitting on that board as a male ally. And we are grateful for that. Beyond partnerships, we have also engaged in academic achievement. I am happy to announce that working with my colleague, Dr. Krista Johnson, my co-partner in all things feminism and womanism at Howard, we have launched the first minor in women, gender, and sexuality studies at Howard universities. And we have 30 students and counting who are already declaring their minor. We also have reason to celebrate. As an academic institution, we believe in research, and I am happy to announce that within 1 year, we have already produced 19 chapters written together with graduate students under my leadership, the leadership of Dr. Anita Plummer, our director for research, and we are going to be publishing a book on women in Howard University departments and colleges within 1 year of existence. Running through the list very quickly, we have also supported faculty with $20,000 in grants for research this summer. We have supported graduate students with $20,000 in grants for research. We have also been the incubator for a program created by faculty, Dr. Bahia Mohammed and Dr. Jenkins in sociology called the Mothers of the Mecca. We have also incubated a program created by students called the Black Feminist Book Club. And we have also partnered with Marriott Foundation to help bring entrepreneurial leadership to students at Howard. I will end up on this note because if I keep going, we'll stay here forever, because I think that in as much as there's still a lot to be done today, I want to pause, take a deep breath, and look at what we have done within 1 year. And I think we have reason to celebrate. So I invite you to celebrate with us. I invite you to partner with us. We cannot do this without your support, without you being behind us. I am thankful for all of you being here, for those watching online, and I hope you will be part of our success story. My challenge to you is, when we meet next year to celebrate our second year, will your name be on the list of achievements I just mentioned? Will you be a part of our success story? So join us. Let us celebrate. Let us make this center a center of excellence for Black women. And as we celebrate, I can also say one last achievement within our 1 year. We have already started activating women's leadership, beginning here at Howard University. And we have documented the leadership journeys of 15 of our deans and senior vice presidents. Because if we want to send a signal that this center is about women's leadership, we start from home. And under the leadership of President Frederick, we have an abundance of women deans at Howard University, probably more than any university you can find in this country. And so these are the stories of the women in leadership at Howard University. Enjoy the celebration.
Oh, my top 3 leadership values would be integrity, persistence.
To be innovative,
To know your purpose.
To read better books.
Honest,
and courage.
Be who you are. Do what's important to you.
By shouldering a balance of kindness, honesty, and courage, a leader will be able to lead effectively.
I see young leaders as being people who are deeply committed to seeing the world be a better place and are willing to take the necessary steps.
Leadership actually can be defined as courage into action.
I see my work as a humanist, a human being, a Black woman, a faculty member, and an administrator, finding ways to make it irresistible to combat injustice wherever you see it.
It is important to understand and to keep in the forefront of our minds what that mission is.
When you lead with heart, the results will be very different because it's personal to you to serve the people and get their tangible results to the front.
This project is important because it centers the experiences of women at Howard. It was made possible through the support from Pivotal Ventures because it is through our stories that we can understand, hear, and lend authenticity to who we are as Black women and how we navigate the different hierarchies into leadership.
Very proud to stand here today and to be able to watch beautiful women that have come in before me. They come with strength, dignity, grace. And as a young PhD student, you're not a student anymore, I'm a doctor, I'm able to really, I'm Dr. Bean, able to really watch women that come before me and be able to follow in their footsteps to do incredible work. So I'm honored to be a part of this center. I'm honored to stand in this position, and I'm thankful for all of the things that we've seen here. But as we move on with the program, this is just one of the projects that we were doing to talk about the phenomenal women here at Howard University in terms of Black women in leadership. But Dr. Duwini has not only used the work that women have done here in leadership, she's also, like she said before in her speech, she's done the work across the globe, and we're appreciative of that. But at this time, we're going to transition into some remarks from our great and our incredible president of Howard University. So HU, please welcome President Wayne A.I. Frederick.
Good morning. The most important thing I could do today is to get out of the way of these great women. So I promise to be brief. First, I'd like to welcome Her Excellency Gingos. I'd like to welcome the incomparable Professor Crenshaw. And I think this panel you'll have will be extremely special today. And obviously having our own Dean Holly moderate such a august discussion, I think is a fitting way to celebrate this. I want to thank Jim Morin. Jim Morin is a trustee at Howard. I met Jim Morin a few years ago, and when, as Dr. Duwini told the story, when she called me, I had no doubt in my mind that I could call on Jim
and Mrs. Moran at the time to make such a donation. And like she said, he didn't hesitate, but he tripled the amount, and for that we're thankful. So I want to thank you for your stewardship as well. I want to thank Dr. Duani because the first time I actually met her, which I think is fitting, was in an airport. She was on her way to Geneva, I believe, and I think, on my way to London at the time, or Kenya, somewhere there. But we met at Dulles. She walked up to me and introduced herself, and informed me that she was, at that time, I think, an assistant professor here at Howard, and what she did. And I was curious enough that when I returned, I reached out to her so that we could chat. She told me about the work that she was doing, and so I was familiar. I point that out because I think it's important for faculty members at the university to recognize that I am here to just facilitate what they must do and remove the barriers. And so I appreciate her reaching out. She's been staunch about the work that she wanted to do, and so I want to congratulate you for not just being dogged about it, but for also having a vision that now has materialized so well. So we congratulate you as well. The most important job I have in life is being the father to Wayne and Kiri Frederick. Kiri Frederick is a 16-year-old junior at a high school here in DC. She is an activist, a lawyer, and I have to get out of this role before she gets to college so that she doesn't come and protest at my office. But I mention her because at the age of 8, she came to me one day and said she did not want to join a gifted math program that was at her school. And when I inquired as to why, the school administration also called me to press me about it. And so I went to her and I said, listen, this is a good opportunity. You can participate in this program. The students who have done very well. And she said she didn't want to participate in it because it was all boys, and that if I've ever been around enough boys, I would recognize that they start things, they mess it up, and then we girls fix it. And I immediately dispatched myself to my room quietly because I realized that she just had solved something that many of us probably are too polite to say. But the point being that I have been surrounded by black women, strong black women, all my life. The matriarch of my family is my 99-year-old grandmother, who I was able to spend some time with just last week, and who to this day, before every important decision that I make or participate in anything of extreme importance to me, I still call upon for her sage input. And it always ends with her assuring me that she would say a prayer, and then she calls the next day to get feedback on how things went. And always has input. And at 99, she's sharp. Christmas is her favorite time of the year. I'll see her later this month. And the reason I will is because I'm the only person in the family that will convince her not to climb on a ladder to paint the house for Christmas. And so I'll go and be doing some painting to convince her she doesn't have to do it. But she has been the matriarch of our family. She's been extremely strong, the mother of 10, grandmother of too many to count, but always there with a listening ear. And I think it's important for us to recognize that's the fabric of what women participate in our country and in our society in general. My mom, who was a nurse for 51 years, didn't become a physician because her then father, who was a lawyer, felt that women should become nurses. He was a good man, but he was wrong on that issue. And so she was determined to have us 3 boys for whatever reason, and wanted one of us to become a physician. So my life's work and calling is really in honor of her and fulfilling a dream that she had, despite the fact that she had a child with sickle cell. So my mom would take me to the hospital where I would be hospitalized and then change her shift at night after feeding my 2 younger brothers so she could come and work in the same ward that I was hospitalized on. So the strength that she displayed, the determination she displayed to ensure that I succeeded is something that I would never be able to pay back. And I tell her all the time that if I had a kid with sickle cell, one, I'm not sure I could have sent him to a foreign country to go to school, and furthermore, I'm not sure I could have made the sacrifices that she made so often to ensure that I would do well. And I mentioned already my 16-year-old. I mentioned these 3 because I think it's important for us to recognize in our society that we have lots of challenges. Black women here in DC are more likely to die giving birth than in most countries around the world, right here in the nation's capital. It's totally a tragedy. Black women who live in Ward 7 and 8 have a 16-year less life expectancy than a white woman who lives in Ward 3, right? And that's separated by 5 miles right here in the nation's capital. So this work that Dr. Duani is doing is essential to life. It's not just about simple empowerment, et cetera. For some people on a daily basis, it's a struggle to just exist. And to exist in a quality way is what we have to be about. So I'm very grateful. And Dr. Duani, you're right. When I got here, we had 1 woman dean out of 13. Dean Holly will tell you that the DNA of Howard University is social justice. And yet still, we sometimes are very loath to speak our truths. We had 1 woman dean out of 13. Today, I'm happy to announce that with the announcement of Dr. Andrea Hayes taking over the Dean of the College of Medicine October 1st, we now have 11 deans out of 14 who are women. And I'll correct only one thing that Dr. Duani said, and that is that those 11 deans are African-American women. It is the largest number of African-American women deans anywhere in the country, and probably anywhere in the world, to be quite frank. There are all women's colleges in this country who have less women deans than we do. So just to be clear, so I'm very proud. All of that to say that my successor, as I've said from day one, will be a woman. And if not, I'll have to come back here and protest myself. And I want to close by, one, acknowledging my deans who are here. So if you can stand so that we can thank you for your support. And I also want to acknowledge Dr. Joyce Ladner, who is the only woman to serve as the interim president of Howard University. I noticed in your program, she's listed as a civil rights activist and sociologist, and I want to make sure I correct it next year so that it says former interim president of Howard University as well. So we thank you for your past and continued service as well. So as I leave you, I want to, again, thank everyone for participating and bringing their support. Your presence and showing up is the first thing that's important. And what is just as important is for us to be allies, us as in men. And not just to be passive allies. It's not about just staying out of your way, but it's making sure that we make a path. And so while there's a lot to be proud of at Howard University, we have to keep pushing. 74% of our undergrads are women. The leadership needs to reflect that. It does now, and it has to do that all the way to the top. But we have to have programs like this that flourish. We have to have opportunities that continue to open up for everyone, and it's not just about equality. Women are overrepresented at Howard University, and therefore you should be overrepresented in every aspect of the university as well. And I stand here fully supportive of that. So Dr. Duani, again, I thank you, congratulate you on the first year, and I look forward for this wonderful program and especially this discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, President Frederick, for your remarks. Now we'll have remarks from 2 HU organizations. First is the president of the Alumni Association, Dr. Candace Harris. Dr. Candace Harris. And then it'll be followed by Ms. Jordan Allen from HUSA.
Greetings. It is with great excitement and gratitude to Dr. Duani for reaching out to me that the Howard University Alumni Association will be partnering with the Women's Center to collectively work towards amplifying and building the next generation of women leaders from Howard University. HUAA's 6-point plan, Bison Engage, Network, Give, Access, Galvanize, and Excellence, embodies the university's current strategic plan of moving Howard forward. It focuses on and addresses the need for the Alumni Association leadership to develop and create ways to engage and sustain multi-generational alumni, to collaborate and partner with the university administration, and it provides action strategies for alumni, students, and friends of Howard to support Howard University. Based on the discussions that I've had with Dr. Duani and under my tenure as HUAA president, we will use the Bison Engage framework to guide us through collaboration with the center's forthcoming Pathways to Leadership program to support Howard University students, to support Howard University students, as well as through sponsorship, mentorship, and other programming. Our alumni have engaged tens of thousands of alums and led hundreds of college fairs and workshops, recruited thousands of students to the university, and as well, we've been able to raise over $300,000 in scholarships this year and raise over $1 million in emergency scholarship funding during the last 2 years. Thank you. And with your help, we will continue to do so proudly. With this partnership, it is our hope to increase access and to utilize our global bison network in such that we can galvanize bison in action by coordinating global, national, and local events for opportunities for our students as well as our alumni. We also want to be sure that we continue the legacy of Howard University excellence, activism, and social justice through sharing our stories and providing opportunities for students and alumni to thrive. Now, shameless plug. I invite all Howard University alumni to serve our alma mater through your time, talent, treasure, and your leadership. So please visit alumni.howard.edu for more information or follow us on our social media, the HUAA. Thank you so much, and I'm looking forward to today's programming.
To Dr. Dewani and the entire staff of the Howard University Center for Women, Gender, and Global Leadership, President Frederick and all university-wide officials, and our honorable guests, the First Lady of NAIMBY, Madam Monica Gangos, and Professor Crenshaw. Good morning. My name is Jordan Allen. I am a senior marketing major from Fort Lauderdale, Florida, and I currently serve as the 62nd president of the Howard University Student Association. It is my privilege and honor to greet you and extend a warm bison welcome on behalf of the Howard University Student Association and our beloved student body. Howard University has long been a sacred space that has nurtured and developed creme de la creme Black leaders that go on to challenge the status quo and reimagine to create a world that strives for equity and equality for all people. And while this institution strives to educate and advance our community as a whole, there's a different level of emphasis on our female student leaders, with over 2/3 of our student body population historically being served by women. Being that the Black woman is the most disrespected woman in America, this institution still strives to nurture its graduated female class to occupy positions that leave no option but for the world to see them as the most respected. Seen through our first female vice president of the United States and Howard University alumna Kamala Harris. I can only imagine what it would have been like for a center like this to be open during Kamala Harris's matriculation here at Howard University. Given that, I think it is so monumental that Amanda Gorman, the first United States Youth Poet Laureate, spoke at her inauguration. I had the opportunity to meet Amanda Gorman before at her lead fellowship in 2017, where I was an Ann Taylor Fellow. And during that time, she reminded us something that she reminded everyone during the day of the inauguration. A quote that she wrote was, "We remember this and more, so we might imagine a day for the girl without such furs, where the wind opens the floodgate for the river of women behind her." This center stands as a reminder of all women who have stood up and paved the way for students like me to continue the work they have chartered and make a difference in the future. It is an honor to stand in the history and to be a part of the first annual Global Leadership of Women Summit here at Howard University Center for Women, Gender, and Global Leadership. Thank you to all honorable guests and speakers for gracing us with your presence and wisdom today, and I look forward to the impact the center will continue to have on the student body here at the university. Briefly, I apologize. I do have to dip out a little early. I have a test in 20 minutes, but thank you for all of the work that you are doing, and thank you for allowing CUSA to be a part.
Thank you, Dr. Harris, and thank you, Ms. Allen. Pass that test, girl. Make us proud. Now, right before we do the fireside chat, we are going to have a brief interlude, and so we'll have a special performance by Dr. Rebecca Dupas, a spoken word piece. So Dr. Dupas is an educator, author, photographer, entrepreneur, and award-winning poet. She was recently named a Baltimore legend in the Baltimore Crown Awards, Her latest work includes a collection of original poems entitled Not Without Black Women, and a children's book, Mario Goes to the Museum, exploring the Black experiences of Black people. And today, she will perform a spoken word piece. Dr. Dupas?
Good morning, everyone. Even Black laughter seems audacious in spaces that expect our silence. A smirk, a long look, a confident response easily mistaken as violent. In a world where a white man's protest is a Black man's riot. When there isn't a seat at the table, a Black body will always seem defiant. How it sits there taking up space, not hinting towards its complexion, but seemingly always talking about race, always hinting towards the whole of its people, always reminding the world that separate will never be equal, that a Black body will always have its sequel, always be persistent in its resistance, how it sits there regal. Regardless of income and opportunity, we are a resilient people, waymakers, even when affirmative action could never. But what is a barrier to a Harriet? What is racial trauma to an Obama? The world tried to trump us, but we keep coming. We went from enslaved in America to America's president. Now that's one heck of a promotion. We went from serving to space holding. Shout out to Black people interrupting whiteness and refusing to be a token. We bend, but we are never broken, knowing that our movements are patrolled. We will have our freedom despite their efforts to control, despite the lane for Black bodies being narrow. We just pray that Black Jesus keeps his eye on the sparrow should red, white, and blue shadows come. From the boardroom to the courtroom, these are racist streets that we roam. We are not praying for heaven at the moment. We just want to make it home. Should someone decide that our lives don't matter enough, should our colleagues or neighbors think that they are going to Amy Cooper us, this is the paradox of Black existence, being relegated to small spaces and still making miracles, especially Black women, who have to consistently remind the world that our gender is not our condition, that our confidence is not a weapon, that despite it all, we will climb, bringing the brilliance of our minds, our colorful language, and our soul for every ancestor that they stole and sold. We are coming for a seat, for the whole table, for the title, for the office, for the label. We are pulling up and we are eating platefuls. We are never wasteful. We are making up for every single meal that we have been denied. We have our own chairs and we're scooting up telling people, okay, it's time for you to move aside. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Dana Williams, and I'm Dean of the Graduate School and Professor of African American Literature and a proud two-time Howard alum, so I appreciate the shout out. In addition to clicking on the website, send us your funds. It's my pleasure to introduce our speakers and our moderator today. Danielle R. Holly joined Howard University School of Law in 2014 as the Dean and as Professor of Law. Prior to joining the Howard faculty, Dean Holly was the Associate Dean of Academic Affairs and Distinguished Professor of Education Law at the University of South Carolina. A scholar of education law and civil rights and an expert on diversity in the legal profession and higher education, Dean Holly holds a Bachelor of Arts from Yale University and a Juris Doctorate from Howard Law School. Dean Holly was recently appointed co-chair of the Board of Directors for Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights. She is a Liberty Fellow through the Aspen Global Leadership Network and a Fellow with the American Council of Education. Dean Danielle Holly. So I'm looking, I can't hear when I can't see, you know? My senses are completely related. And I'm usually pretty good at this. Like, I judge people, honestly, who can't, like, read lips. So, my apologies, President Frederick. Co-founder and executive director of the African American Policy Forum and faculty director of the Center for Intersectionality and Social Policy Studies, Professor Kimberly W. Crenshaw is a pioneering scholar and writer on civil rights, critical race theory, Black feminist legal theory, race, racism, and the law. She holds distinguished faculty positions at Columbia Law School and the Law School at the University of California, Los Angeles. Professor Crenshaw's work has been foundational in intersectionality, a term she coined to describe the double bind of simultaneous racial and gender prejudice. Notably, this concept was influential in the drafting of the Equality Clause in the South African Constitution. She's a sought-after speaker who conducts workshops and training on intersectionality and structural racism. Professor Crenshaw's popular podcast, Intersectionality Matters, ranks among the top 5% in podcasts. She also hosts the internet series Under the Blacklight, the intersectional vulnerabilities that COVID laid bare. Professor Crenshaw serves on the Committee on Law and Justice of the National Academies of Science, and she has received numerous Lifetime Achievement Awards from the Association of American Law Schools, Planned Parenthood, and the ERA Coalition, for example. Prospect Magazine and We Agree named her one of the 10 most important thinkers in the world. Please welcome Professor Crenshaw. Her Excellency, Monica Gingos, is an attorney with more than 20 years of experience in the financial sector, having held senior roles in capital markets, corporate finance, and private equity. During her time in the private sector, Her Excellency was regularly identified as among the most influential Namibians and as one of Africa's top 100 economic leaders. She was a co-shareholder and managing director of Namibia's largest private equity fund for over a decade. Since becoming First Lady of Namibia, Her Excellency has initiated programs that sustainably lift vulnerable populations out of poverty traps. One of those programs, for example, is Project Be Free, which is designed to provide a continuum of holistic services, including life skills programs, mental health support, the full spectrum of adolescent-friendly sexual and reproductive health services, including comprehensive sexuality education, skills and leadership development, entrepreneurship development, and adolescent-friendly edutainment. Please join me in giving a warm Howard welcome to our guest, Professor Crenshaw, and Her Excellency Gingos. And in receiving, of course, Dean Danielle Holly Walker, who will moderate this morning's conversation.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Dean Williams. It is wonderful to see you this morning. Dr. Dewani, congratulations on this incredible celebration of your center after 1 year. Dr. Frederick, Dr. Wuto, Mr. Marin, everyone who is gathered here with us today. This is going to be a fantastic conversation with two of the most distinguished women attorneys in the world we have with us today. It is just an honor to be with both of you today, and we can't wait to hear about your journeys and about the future, really, for women around the world. So, Your Excellency, let's start with you. Tell us a little bit about, and Professor Crenshaw, you can follow her, about your childhood and when you made the decision to become an attorney and an entrepreneur, and a little bit about your journey to where you are now.
I had just crossed my legs, and I uncrossed him because my mother hates it when I do that. So that's the tyranny of African mothers that I continue to live under. But I was a middle child, and I think that served me well as a first lady because I think some of you are middle children. I came from a big family, so middle kids don't count. You don't get bought new clothes, nobody remembers your birthday. And your parents really just care about the oldest and the youngest. So middle kids kind of learn to be quiet, but also assert themselves when they realize these people have forgotten I exist. So as First Lady, that skill has really taught me to sit back quietly and observe power, observe the powerful, observe those who operate around the powerful, and observe those who gain power and how they wield it. Because when somebody doesn't notice you sitting watching them, they show things that they would otherwise not have shown. And that's why presidents are particularly bad. And that's why they normally are surrounded by not so great people, because they don't see as clearly as those who sit quietly and observe those around them. So middle kids, we up. The other thing is, I saw the president speaking about his grandmother with such warmth, and I would do the same if mine was alive, because like yourself, many of us passed through the hands of our grandmothers, and it's a feature particularly in Africa. I grew up for a time with my grandmother because my brother was only a year old and my mom couldn't really handle all of us. So she sent me to the north while they were working in a different place. So I was with my grandmother for a long time and then joined the rest of the family. But many of us also sent our children to our mother. So she was also an active grandmother. And I too have looked after many family children. So I come from an extended family where relationships are important. And politics is difficult for me because relationships are transactional. And I mourn whether it's a friendship, whether whatever it is. So that's one part that I'm not adjusting to well. Then in terms of career, I think with me it was, I decided to go into the capital markets when and I say this with humility, when I felt that I was going to do well in law. It stopped being a challenge for me when I came to that realization, and I wanted a challenge. And I knew very little of capital markets at the time, and moved to investment banking for the same reason, and moved to run a private equity fund for the same reason, because I want to push myself to where I need to be. And in a way, it's been good, because as First Lady, you don't earn your title, and I'll speak to that later. So it was important for me to have done so much before, so that I don't need anybody to wonder, what has this one actually done to be here? And it's important, I think, for women to earn your title, because you'll always be questioned. It was a pity you read my CV, because one superpower I have as a First Lady is being underestimated. It's fantastic, because I can only do well. I can only surprise you. So it's a great thing sometimes to be underestimated, whether it's as a black woman, whether it's as a First Lady, because you can only overachieve. So I tend to take a positive view on everything. So I had a chaotic childhood, but it wasn't traumatic. I was protected from harm, and that was important, because I'm able to go back to my childhood. Look, there's some things that you'll recognize when you revisit your childhood with adult eyes, that, oh, wow, those people were about to get divorced at that point, or there was something wrong with that uncle. But fundamentally, I was protected from harm. And that enables me to navigate life without a lot of baggage, nor do I pass my trauma to my kids. And what I always recommend to my friends when I see they've got untreated trauma is get healed, so you don't break more. So all of us have been broken somewhere and somehow, and it's important for us to heal whatever broke, so that we stop that transferal of trauma from generation to generation. So that's where I come from and how I think about things.
That's wonderful. Professor Crenshaw.
Well, so first of all, I want to thank Dr. Duani for giving me an opportunity to make my mom proud. If she were here, she'd be so happy. She was a proud graduate of Howard, and I know she'd be delighted to know that I'm part of this amazing conversation, so I'm very honored. I also want to give a shout out to our Chief of Staff, Sharmina Nelson, who is also a Howard alum and always brings Howard into our conversation. So really, really delighted to be here. So, I start with my mom because in my house growing up, a lot of Black folks have pictures when I grew up of John Kennedy, Martin Luther King. We had Thurgood Marshall, and we had the House of Representatives, the Black folks from the 19th century. Those were pictures in our house. And so that more or less, set an expectation, both of internalizing the imperative of making the next generation better off than the one before, and seeing law not the way that some people see law as, in pejorative ways, but seeing law as potentially transformative. So that was sort of the backdrop. But if I were really to trace from childhood some of the habits and the play that I engaged in, if you were to predict what I was going to be, you might have thought that I was going to be someone in financial markets, because my favorite game growing up was Monopoly. I loved Monopoly. I loved Monopoly so much that my parents bought me for Christmas like this suitcase, this little tiny, it was a briefcase. You open it up and the money was all there, and you could I loved it. I loved having the little hat going around the board. That was me. And it's at a certain point I learned that you were more likely to win if you were winning when your parents called you home and you said, okay, let's just keep all the stuff that we've gotten this round and start the next round exactly where we left off. So I'd write down what everybody had, where people's little, things were on the board. So when we got back, we would start exactly where we started, right? So in that way, I was beginning to learn that the rules about how to play the game can be used in a way that allow for advantages that were won in one generation to just be passed on to the next one. The only question is whether I could convince everyone else to accept my rule, that if I'm winning, I get to keep what I have the next time we play. And so some of the advocacy for trying to present and persuade people to accept a set of rules that may actually disadvantage them was part of the skill of actually being a lawyer. So that kind of was in the back of my mind, and it was only when I got to law school that I realized, okay, this is the game that gets played across generations and throughout society. There's some rules that got established when we weren't part of the game. We didn't have pieces on the board. We didn't go past go. We didn't get a chance to buy Boardwalk. And we are still living by those rules that put some people in an advantaged position over others. So once I figured that out, then the question was, well, how do rules create race? How do rules create what advantages get associated with what race you are? How is it that the limited scope of what counts as equality takes into account those rules and treats them as natural, normal, just there? They don't look at that stuff over there. Just look at where you are on the board. So a lot of what drives the work that I do is remembering all the way back when I was in control of the rules and how I knew how to set up the board in a way that advantaged me, and then turning that inside out to see how it's playing out. So that's more or less the kind of immediate trajectory. And I think if I were to also go back and just talking about the way that sometimes trauma contributes to what you want to do. My father was the director of public housing, and one of his passions was to create scattered site housing, namely to move away from ghettoization of people who are housing poor, and create the same kind of opportunities to live in the same kind of neighborhoods that everybody else. Public housing shouldn't necessarily mean concrete jungles that are underserved and, you know, don't facilitate the best things in life. So his goal was to spread public housing all around the county. Of course, he encountered a lot of resistance, and one of his goals was to go to law school and learn how to fight, right? How to take up those rules and change them. So I was so excited when he went to law school because he had to study and I had to study. So my dad and me, we were studying together. And so I would see him, you know, look at these big, thick books, and I just couldn't wait till I could do it. And then he passed suddenly when I was 10, and he was in his second year of law school. So I think some of my desire from law school was to reconnect with my father's passion. I had all those books, and so I would sit at the big desk and pretend like I knew what the heck they were saying. So the idea was to grow into this vision that my father set and that my mother helped shape.
It's really powerful. So we continue in the year 2022 to have just tremendous deficits in terms of the representation of women, especially in the fields that the two of you are most associated with in terms of law, capital markets, private equity, venture capital, all of those areas, and academia, as we heard Dr. Frederick tell the story of the transformation of women in leadership, and I see our COO is here, Dr. Dubois. The transformation in leadership even that we've seen here at this university over the last 8 or 9 years. Talk to us about, and we know in law, only 2.5% of lawyers in the United States are Black women. Only 2.5%. Talk to us about why we continue to see those gaps and deficits, and what we, as current leaders who represent that very small percentage of people in our professions, what should we be doing to kind of encourage an increase of women both in our profession and also in leadership? Your Excellency.
The numbers are important. I look at a country like Namibia, where we have 40% women in political leadership. Our parliament has 40% women. It's higher than the US. And how did we get there? It happened because of quotas. So personally, I used to be against quotas for women's leadership in the beginning of my career. I've changed my mind. It is the only way to accelerate the advancement of women. And then the refrain is always, yes, but what? It must be quality women, they must be hardworking, they must basically be perfect. I say, no, they can be as imperfect as the men in leadership. And so I'm not advocating for average people to ascend. I'm advocating for everybody who goes into leadership to be judged by the same filter that women are judged when quotas are applied. So certainly quotas. So the numbers are important, but they're not enough, because I know many female lawyers who've left the profession simply because they felt unseen, they felt unheard, and there just wasn't enough, the approach wasn't differentiated to take into account their very specific circumstances. Let me use the example of law. I don't know what the system is in the States, but in Namibia you need to be an article clerk. Now, many of us, when we leave university, our parents don't understand this business of articled clerkship, where you get paid a pittance. So they understand once you graduate, you're a lawyer, you're earning money, you must look after the entire family. Now I need to transport myself. I need to have accommodation, and I'm earning very little. I can't help much at home. So home is not supportive. They want me to get a real job. Whereas my counterparts, male and female, have parents who can afford to buy them cars, pay for their rent. And it does make us make some short-term decisions about not going into law firms or staying in law firms, and rather going for utilizing our qualifications for something that can give us higher remuneration so we can take care of the obligations that we have towards our families. So the workplace often doesn't understand the responsibilities of women, particularly Black women. Then there's, so we must create a differentiated approach. also recognizing Black women are not homogeneous. There's differences between your experiences and my experiences, but the world doesn't see that difference. When we sit next to each other like this, and you don't know that I'm an African and she's African American, the world sees us as the same, judges us through the same lens. So there's a lot more similarity than what sometimes we appreciate in how the world sees and treats us. And then the last one that I struggle with, and I say this respectfully, I say it for the sake of brevity, but the Beijing Conference women are clashing with a younger generation of women, where a younger generation of women are feeling betrayed, they're feeling misunderstood, they have much more progressive views, and they're not understanding each other. With the Beijing Conference women who are becoming, perhaps as they age, a little bit more conservative, a little bit more accepting of the status quo, and a little bit more of be patient, wait your turn. And many of us find ourselves in the middle. I understand and recognize where the Beijing women are coming from. I was too young to go to Beijing, so I'm not a Beijing woman, but I'm also not part of the younger generation of women. And we must find a way, I try to do it personally, where we provide more support to a younger generation of Black women, and understand that means us transitioning slowly out of the system. So we can make space for an intergenerational mix of different views that we are tolerant over. Because again, sometimes we don't understand that our experiences are not the same. There are women who have different experiences. I see my ambassador from Tunisia to DC is here. So even with an African woman from North Africa and me from Southern Africa, there'll be differences, but fundamentally, there's things that are very similar in us. So in recognizing these differences, but also recognizing that the barriers seen and unseen that we need to overcome are fundamentally the same.
So I would broaden the sort of statistical picture of the deficit by also mentioning that of Fortune 500 companies, there are 3 women of color who are CEOs, and none of them are Black. I would say within the C-suite, there are about 3% Black women in C-suite. And I would say 7% of the workforce is Black women. They're 12% make up the lowest wage level in the American workforce. So when it comes to economic hierarchy, Black women still are deeply marginalized compared even to the marginalization of white women, compared to even the marginalization of Black men. So some part of that is, I call it intersectional marginalization, right? It's race and gender and class are all contributing to create the economic circumstances under which Black women's aspirations are sometimes muted, reversed, and towed under. What do we do with that? So I would say there are institutional realities, but equally important are cultural, political ones. I think institutionally, there's a lot of information that tells us why when Black women enter into the workforce, that their upward trajectory is stalled. We know a lot about how mentoring, for example, is a disproportionately unavailable a sort of accelerator for Black women as compared, of course, to white men, but also as compared to white women and Black men. Sometimes I say that if we think about who the most likely mentors are, at this moment, they're still white men. And it's still the case that mentorships actually take place over sort of social familiarity, right? So I sometimes call this, can you fit within his imaginary in his locker room or his living room? If you can play golf, talk about sports, go out and hang out, you can sort of cross that racial divide. You got a little bit of something to work with. Or if they can say, you know, you remind me of your daughter. My daughter, or you remind me, you know, of a teacher I had, or I really want to mentor young women, but I don't look like his daughter. I'm not the kind of person that he would think, oh, our mentorship situation can be framed in something that feels familiar. I simply say that that's what intersectional marginality adds. It's not as though it's completely different from the ways that white women experience barriers, and it's not completely different from the way black men do, but the resources that you have, the discourses of familiarity that help you negotiate that difference are less when you're 2 steps removed, God forbid if you're 3 or 4 steps removed from those who still hold the seat of power, who can determine whether when he looks at you, he sees a manager, a go-getter, or he sees somebody who is angry and pushy, and we don't know what to how to deal with her. And I think any black woman who has tried to, you know, rise in the ranks of leadership knows that that is a very thin line that we have to navigate between being, you know, a no-nonsense leader and being seen as, well, y'all know what the word is, right? So these are social, institutional realities that still exist. I sometimes talk about implicit biases. I talk about attribution error, you know, just the fact that if they don't have categories for you, or if the category in which you sit in is one that's already shaped by a range of stereotypes, when you do performances that fall outside of that stereotype, it's literally hard for people to remember it. Yeah. They don't have a file for it. But if you come in late, or if you do something else that fits in the stereotype, that's what will be remembered. So just the basic evaluation is sometimes that much more difficult when you're dealing with multiple ways in which your being just falls outside of the zone of familiarity. The easiest way that I sometimes talk about it, and this is apocryphal, I think everybody has heard this. There's the story where a father and son get into an accident. The ambulance rushes the son to surgery. The surgeon comes in, looks down and says, oh, I can't operate on this person. This is my son. And it's like, oh my God, how can the son have 2 fathers? Well, you know, nowadays that's a possibility, but traditionally, you know, back then, the whole point of the story was you imagined that the surgeon was a man. When you heard surgeon, you didn't see in your mind's eye the possibility that it could be a woman. Well, race to that, and you get a sense of how distant it is from possibility. When they look at us, they see a managing partner in the firm. They look at us and they see the CEO, you know, of a major, you know, corporation. So these are still the things that we're dealing with. And I'll just end by saying, when I say it's partly cultural, there was a magazine cover story. I don't know if it was Newsweek Time or something, about a decade ago, and it had Beyonce on the cover, Star Jones, maybe it was Oprah, somebody else wildly successful, right? 3 of the most successful black women in the world. And the tagline was something like, you know, so black women are successful. Will that defeat their ability to be partners? Now, that's a whole nother conversation that we can have. But the main point is that there is this assumption that black women are doing well across the board. There's this assumption that they are actually doing, you know, socially, economically better than their male counterparts. And that assumption actually suppresses conversation about what the gendered barriers still are that black women face. And I think it's going to show up in politics. There are a lot of people, I'm talking to folks in Georgia a lot, and they're telling me that there's some conversation within the Black community that Black women have gotten too far. You know, there's Kamala Harris, there's Ketanji, right? And I'm like, there was Barack before Kamala, and Thurgood Marshall was on the Supreme Court. You know, he was appointed in '68. We're talking over 60 years after that. So how is it that there is still the perception that even these late additions to our portfolio make some people feel that we're getting too far too fast? When it happens with race and white people say it, we're like, oh, that's just ridiculous, right? There's so much difference between Black well-being and white well-being. Well, the same thing might be going on inside our communities, and we have to figure out how to talk about that.
So we've heard about your career as an attorney and as an entrepreneur, but you have one of the most unique roles that almost any woman in the world has. You are a First Lady. So talk to us a little bit about your role as First Lady and what you see as the role for women around the world who serve as First Ladies. Obviously, in this country, we have a huge, at least I'm a huge fan of Michelle Obama, and think she made an incredible difference in the lives of women and girls here in the United States and around the world. What do you see as your role, as particularly as First Lady, and the role of First Ladies around the world?
I think if we link it to women's leadership, if we do what we're supposed to do around getting women's leadership where it needs to be, and we have more female presidents, we'll work First Ladies out of a role, which is a good thing. Because ultimately, we exist in a space simply because there aren't women leaders in that space. So in a way, it's we're not displacing anybody, but we're certainly holding the seats in places where we don't necessarily have decision-making authority. We have potential presenteeism. We're there, but we can't do much with being there. And that's why we have a responsibility to make sure that issues of women's leadership is advanced. I always joke to my husband, he doesn't think it's funny, that it's ironic that your kitchen cabinet has no woman. and I think most male leaders' kitchen cabinets lack women. And I've made the comment enough for him to be conscious when they are thinking about things to invite a few more female political or private sector leaders, because he knows there'll be a snark comment from his wife. So even though there isn't a defined role and power, there are things you can do and say around you. I do a lot of mentorship for women within the political party I belong to, but also opposition parties. We ignore each other in public, but we certainly are communicating and guiding each other and mentoring each other and learning from each other, but also putting each other's names forward. But I see this list, but what about these women? There's about 4 women doing fantastic. And that's how you make sure that women find themselves in spaces that you can't necessarily occupy. And that's what I would do as a woman. But I've got a particular passion for younger women. And making sure that they don't make the mistakes or pay the prices that many of us had to pay. By being open with our stories, by guiding, by sharing, by connecting, we can make the road, we can remove a lot of obstacles for those that come after us. And I take that responsibility particularly seriously. And then as a collective, as First Ladies, we have, and again, being a First Lady is, how you First Lady is really based on your context. So it is different being an African First Lady relative to being a First Lady in the States. It is different being a First Lady in West Africa as opposed to Southern Africa. It is context specific. But as a collective, we have an organization of African First Ladies, which I'm president of. And again, I went home and I said, oh, I'm also president now. And again, my husband didn't think, it's funny. But that organization has incredible convening power. And the First Ladies increasingly are utilizing that convening power to have difficult conversations. I said earlier, this is the one place where I didn't earn a title. But so when you have unearned privilege, when you have unearned social capital, you must spend it. And you must spend it on difficult conversations, whether it's about women's leadership, whether it's about the role of younger women being almost blocked by an older generation who at some point need to gracefully exit the stage and allow others to take their space, difficult conversations. So every time I'm being criticized for something that I've said that is unpopular, which is quite often, I feel that, great, I've spent some social capital. So I'll keep quiet for about 2 months and rebuild my social capital, only to spend it again. And I think if I can leave having changed the conversation and brought a few more issues to light, I think I've done my work. And there's lots of things that I do, and I know my protocol and security teams have gotten tired of me, which people probably don't expect me to do or be. But I think it's important for the next First Lady as well, for me to break a few of the confines in which we're forced to operate. Because there's no rules that should confine anyone. You should basically fundamentally be able to be yourself in any role. And then the last part is really about, I wake up a lot feeling, why are we still having this conversation? And feeling I'm not doing enough. Because the issues faced by women and Black women specifically, the conversations remain fundamentally the same. And I've consoled myself to say it's maybe a good thing, feeling I'm not doing enough. Because because it forces me to try and do more. Because when I do leave the space, and ours is soon, we have 2 term limits, our time is up in 2025, I can't wait. But when my time is up, I don't want to live with regret that I should have addressed this more. I should have fought more for that. So I'd rather take the unpopularity and the criticism I sometimes get now than to regret it later. That I did. And there's still a few issues I feel I don't do enough on. Self-protection, there's confines. But I certainly am comfortable that when I leave, I will know I occupied a space and utilize the privilege and the social capital in a way that benefited many other people. And last point, and this is a mistake that people in proximity to power do, lots of people utilize their proximity to benefit themselves and make themselves actually quite dangerous for the person who's powerful that they are in proximity to. But we can't deny that there is power in proximity. So you must utilize it for the benefit of others. It could be, you could be close to the president of Howard University, you could be close to the dean, you could be close to the chairperson. That is proximity. But when you utilize it only for yourself, it's a missed opportunity for everybody else who doesn't have that proximity. So how I see my role and how I see the role of most First Ladies is that we must be a connector for people who otherwise wouldn't be in those rooms, who otherwise wouldn't be able to access. Professor Dawani, you said, thank goodness he answered my email. Politicians aren't great at answering emails, so you're lucky. So sometimes I'll have to send that email for somebody else. So I try to be conscious about and intentional about how I use my proximity.
So Professor Crenshaw just won a major award from Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights the other night. We celebrated her at the Higginbotham Gala. And
under the co-chair.
I think I read your work for the first time when I was about 19 years old. And it changed the way that I thought about the world and everything around it, and so much about rules. And I think you've done that. How many students who are here have read Professor Crenshaw's work and feel the same? Yeah. I saw she had probably everyone who was celebrated at that gala, there was the longest line to meet you. and included a 10-year-old boy who was the son of one of the Capitol police officers from January 6th that we honored, who came up to me and he said, please, 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 can you introduce me to Professor Crenshaw? So your work on critical race theory and on intersectionality has transformed how people think about law, how we think about ourselves. And I think over the last year, what's happened is critical race theory has obviously become completely demonized by people who have no intentions to actually understand what critical race theory is, but are simply using it as a scary boogeyman for talking about race at all. So talk to us about where kind of the idea of writing about intersectionality came from and how you're dealing with your newfound either fame or infamy. I was going to say fame, but some would say infamy. And what it means to you to have, this platform to really talk about your life's work in this way for people who are not lawyers, because probably 2 years ago, the only people who would have known intersectionality would have been lawyers and college students who studied it, and now the entire world knows about your work.
So I welcome the opportunity to talk about what intersectionality and critical race theory really are, since for the most part it has been introduced to the public in a way that was intentionally designed to distort what the projects have been, to suppress the energies that were generated in 2020 in response to the George Floyd murder, to provide people who are insecure in the changing demographics of the country with a focal point for their insecurity, and frankly, as a vehicle to move white nationalist sentiments to the center of American politics. So to have named the container that they dumped all that stuff in and like moved it into the center like the Trojan horse, it's not a fun situation to be in. I already talked a little bit about critical race theory when I talked about monopoly, right? Critical race theory came out of the generation of young kids who, like me, watched the civil rights movement on the television. Like we were 6, 7, we didn't get a chance to go and sit on in the lunch counters or ride the buses, but we saw that energy. We were of that generation who really believed ain't no stopping us now. Segregation has fallen, and now it's up to us to go into these institutions and do our thing. Except for the fact when I was a kid, there were very few institutions that were not touched by white supremacy. Very few professions that were actually inclusive. In 1969, less than 2% of all lawyers are Black. It's not that much better today. So we went into these institutions with the sensibility of we are the civil rights generation, the post-civil rights generation. These doors should be open. These institutions should function in a way that embody the values of the civil rights movement: equity, justice, inclusion. And we got there and we had not read the fine print, right? That doesn't mean that we're going to change anything in this institution that we used to do except let you in it. So be glad you're here and shut up. And we were thinking, well, what is the point of spending all this money for this professional degree that is undereducating us, miseducating us, not really telling us the truth about how law had functioned, both to create race, to create the disadvantages associated with race, to back up and ensure the advantages that went to other races, namely not us. And so that's what we wanted to learn, and that's not what they wanted to teach. So we had a standoff about that, and that standoff led to a big movement at Harvard Law School. It led to a demand for an alternative course that actually looked at how law was not simply the savior of black people. It wasn't necessarily the neutral referee. It was part of the problem. And if we couldn't name the problem, we couldn't solve the problem. So critical race theory just came out of that instinct to say, we need to talk far more honestly and critically about the role law has played and is continuing to play in maintaining racial hierarchy. That's it. That's all of it. Now, that's not what you're getting in the newspapers. That's not what you're hearing when parents are going to school boards saying, just because I don't want my kids to be taught critical race theory doesn't mean I'm a racist. Well, kind of does. And so intersectionality is situated within critical race theory because I was interested in how the law deals with questions having to do with black women. And the answer wasn't great. I found that when black women were making claims that they were being discriminated against on the basis of their race and their gender, the courts were saying, you can't make this claim because this business actually doesn't practice race discrimination. Look, we hire black men. Now, we're hiring them for dangerous jobs, dirty jobs, floor jobs. We don't pay them well, but we're hiring them, so you can't claim race discrimination. And we actually hire women, too. We hire them for receptionists and secretaries. Now, the women we hire aren't black, but we are hiring women. So from their vantage point, this is basically telling us, you can't make a claim, black woman, because we do hire black people and we do hire women, just not you. And I couldn't figure out why that made sense to courts. Like, what were they not seeing about what these black women were saying to say that you're not telling us you're discriminating against us on the basis of race? So intersectionality was just a remedial frame to talk to judges who didn't seem to be quick enough, smart enough, exposed enough to understand, yes, you can be discriminated against on the basis of race and gender, and that should be included in Title VII. So it was just a metaphor. We go through intersections every day. Every day we have to cross traffic going in one direction. We call that racism. We have to cross traffic going in another direction. We can call it sexism. Some of us have to cross traffic that's shaped by class, sexuality, gender identity, ability. All of these make up the structures which determine what your life chances are. If we interpret law to tell us that, no, it's just one or the other, it can't be all of them, it means a lot of us don't have a chance of actually seeking the kind of interventions that are necessary to lift the burdens on our opportunity. So intersectionality was just that, using a visual metaphor to really tell a more complex story than these judges thought that they could entertain. Now, what do I make of how it's been distorted? I am not surprised that the right wing has sought to use these terms that people don't know in order to stay them, keep them from getting involved, to protect public education, to protect the sensibilities around racial justice, to say no to their effort to make racism unsayable, unspeakable. I'm not surprised. They're playing their game. What I'm surprised about is us. I'm surprised how many people sort of sat back and said, well, that's not me. I'm not a critical race theorist. I teach Black history. I don't deal with intersectionality. I teach diversity, corporate DEI. I mean, we go down the list. The distinctions that we're making are not the distinctions they're making. They're coming after all of it. The entire equal justice apparatus. So if we can't figure out how to line up together and fight against this effort to make racial justice, gender justice, all the kinds of justices that we're fighting for unsayable, they are going to win. So there's that saying, I know people have heard it, you know, first they came from the trade unionists and I didn't do anything because I wasn't a trade unionist. And then they came for the Jews and I didn't do anything because I wasn't Jewish. and the list goes down, and then they came for me and there was nobody left. That's the situation we're in. If we can't say, well, that's not me. They don't care that it's not you. What they care is taking equal justice, equity, and the whole history behind this country off the table so we don't have a ground to stand on. So if we want to protect this democracy, we've got to protect the frames that tell us that our democracy has deficits that we still need to fix.
So this is going to be my final question, but we will have time for audience questions in just a moment. So if you have a question for Her Excellency or Professor Crenshaw, please start to think about them. So my final question for both of you is about the future. And that's really why we're all here, is to think not just about, and I appreciate how much you've been talking about the need for some generations to move aside to allow other generations to come forth. And for my students, and I think the students in this room, we're about 70% Black women here as students at Howard. And so when I think about my law students, I'm always wondering, what is the world like for them 20 years from now, 30 years from now? Will they be sitting here having a similar discussion? One of them is Dean with two prominent lawyers 20 years from now with the same discussion. Or are centers like the one that we've created here, that Dr. Dewani has created, will centers like this one help us to eliminate or minimize the problems that we're seeing enough so that we can move forward without needing to think as much about gender as a barrier, as race as a barrier? So talk to us a little bit, Your Excellency, about what you say to young women who you meet who are looking to the future. Is the future bright for them? What are the things that you tell the next generation about what are the critical things that they should be engaged in?
So when I think about young women, I think about my youngest child is 22 years old. She's still in university. And when I speak to other young women, I'm speaking to her as well. And I tell them what I think, and I think it's the immediate future is going to get a little bit worse before it gets better, because they're going to live through the backlash that we're already starting to see. There have been gains between our time and our mother's time, but those gains we're starting to pay for them now. And our daughters, unfortunately, came just in time to suffer the brunt of the backlash, whether it's on critical race theory, whether it's gains that we've made in recognizing that there's certain levels of discrimination that aren't acceptable. But there's reversals everywhere. And unfortunately, young women are going to deal with that backlash. But as things happen in cycles, they are also going to see a trajectory that will be faster than what we've seen in our careers, in our lifetimes. But there's other aspects, especially on the social side, because community societies have a tendency to lag behind the changes that society goes through. And that will manifest itself, firstly, in relationships. I often wonder with my daughter, who's going to marry this kid, because her views, her ways of thinking, I see why in countries like Namibia, part of the backlash is in gender-based violence, where men assert themselves through their fists. On women like my daughter, who assert themselves through their achievement. And to me, my only request, whoever she marries, is just bring my child back. If you don't agree, don't beat my child. Because that certainly is becoming one of the features. When you say Howard University is 70% Black female, I worry where the Black males are. Because I know where they are, in Namibia. And it's on a path to prison. It's on a path to fighting for state procurement. It's on lots of difficult paths that will make it difficult for them to be supportive of their wives and partners. So the whole thing about equity is that nobody should be left behind. And that leads me to the next conversation about the persistent question I get is, what about the boy child? What about male inclusion? And I agree There must be male inclusion. There must be an understanding that the boy child also needs interventions. But those interventions will not be the same as for the girl child. Let's also agree that the boy child doesn't necessarily face issues of inequality. His challenges are different. So I'm cautious with this discussion because often it's made and highlighted by people who seek to displace gains being made in the protection of adolescent girls and women. But also recognizing that there is a critical importance for male involvement in inclusion. We've seen it today at Howard University with your donor, with the role that your president, Professor Dawane, has been playing in shaping of the center. So it's critically important, but it mustn't be used as a diversion of the gains being made and the specific measures being placed around adolescent girls who face different challenges. So differentiated assistance to both so that both can be functional human beings in the workplace, at home, in the community.
So the question about the future is, it weighs heavily on me right now, because in many ways it feels like we are playing a chapter of the past. I've sometimes said that white supremacy in this country is like a Halloween franchise. There's a new version that comes out every year, and it's the same. Is that Michael Myers? Whatever. He never dies. You know, the end of the last episode is just the beginning of the next one, and you want the characters to remember, you know what, he's probably not dead, so let's go and really take care of him this time. They just go off, and it's going to come back the next time. And that, to me, is what feels like we're in the middle of right now, right? So we've got some of the same arguments, some of the same efforts to actually take us backwards. We know that historically education was the thing that was denied to us in order to keep us under heel. I'm going to start quoting now from my new favorite movie, The Woman King. There was this, The Woman King.
Oh, if you've not seen it, go see The Woman King. It is so
like
good.
after this. Like I might even go again to see it for the fourth time. But there's a quote in there, something to the effect that the best way to keep a people oppressed is to convince them that they don't have a right to be free.
Yes.
I mean, there are various versions of this, you know, that all of our peoples across the diaspora have to say, but education has been that thing that they've denied us so that we can't imagine the possibilities of us to be free. In the United States, it used to be a crime, you know, to teach an enslaved person to read and to write. One of the first things Black people did after Reconstruction was to build public schools. And one of the first things that was attacked in redemption, which was the end of Reconstruction, was first of all our right to vote, and second, our right to learn, our right to have our story told, a right to see our current condition within the context of our history. Guess what's happening today? The same thing. They're attacking our right to vote, and they're attacking our right to learn, our right to understand, the prisms that we need to understand why our wealth is like 4 times less than white people, why many of our neighborhoods are more segregated with fewer resources, even controlling for class, why there are wealth gaps and health gaps and power gaps. If we're not able to historicize it, if we're not able to tell our children what the history is, they're going to infer something, and it's not what we're going to want them to infer. And we know this. Kenneth Clark doll studies. Y'all know something about that, right? So what I worry about is if we don't lift up the lessons from the past, I don't know what the future looks like. It's not as though, Martin Luther King says this, time doesn't do anything inherently. Time is just, you know, passing minutes. It's what you do in that time that changes the future. So my sense is what we do now, what we do today, what we fight for today, that's going to determine the future 20 years from now, 40, 50 years from now, that our young people inherit. I like to think sometimes about what our people were thinking in this country in like 1876. It was as Reconstruction was starting to wane, troops were leaving the South, Black elected officials were losing their districts, the Supreme Court was undermining the entire infrastructure, of civil rights and equal rights. Did they think that this was just happening for a season? Or did they know it was a century? And do we think that this is happening, or is it happening for a century? So we need to, I'm all for, I want to put ourselves in the future, but I want it to be a future that we're starting to make today. And for that, that means we have to step up to the struggles of today. So one of the things that we're trying to do with AAPF, we're going on a Freedom Readers Tour starting on Saturday. So I'm running out of here to get the bus together. So we're going to go to 26 different stops from Minnesota all the way to Florida. And we're passing out those books they don't want us to read. Right? Yeah. So you want to know why they don't want us to know the 1619 Project? Well, we're going to give you the 1619 Project. You want to know what critical race theory is? We're going to give you critical race theory. We're also going to give you Toni Morrison's The Bluest Eye. Right? How can that be? Okay. Ruby Bridges. So we're going to pass these out, and we're going to draw the connection between suppressing our knowledge and suppressing our power, suppressing our right to read, suppressing our right to vote, our right to name, our right to be. All of these things are together. So if we care about our future, we have to fight for it right now.
We have time, Dr. Dewani, I believe, for one or two questions. Okay.
There's a mic on both sides of the room, so if you have a question, please make your way to the mic. We have a few questions.
I'll call on you as I see you at the mic. And what I would ask, as you ask your questions of our panelists, please tell us who you are, your name, and your affiliation with the university. I'm going to start over here. I'm going to trade mics. I'll call here, and then I'll call over here next. So, yes, please.
Okay. Hello, everyone. My name is Phoenix Smith. I am a junior sociology major, organizational communications minor from Kansas City, Missouri. First of all, I want to say I am so honored to be in front of you all. Professor Crenshaw, I am in complete awe. I grew up reading your books as my parents are educators, and our conversations, we definitely mentioned you several times at our kitchen table. So thank you for being here in front of me. My question is for Her Excellency. I am the founder of my own company, a creative organization or creative company, a Fiber Production. Started it here. Well, it's not a school org, but definitely started it on my journey here. And right now I am definitely in my younger stages, but I want this to be a long-term thing. So my question for you is, how did you manage, or how did you find and manage the foundation of your brand and business? As a woman, for sure, I have found difficulty like standing my ground and being assertive without being too much. But I want my success will come, and I need it. So I'm just trying to make sure like I'm doing everything I'm supposed to be doing with the people I'm supposed to be doing it with. So again, my question is, how did you find and manage the foundation of your brand and business?
Of my personal brand or the business?
Well, I'm not familiar with your entrepreneurship, so if you can introduce that as well, and then answer how you should,
Yeah. So how I realized very quickly that how I managed my personal brand and what was said about me and my work, I couldn't manage it. There were stereotypes, there were assumptions. When I listened to Professor Crenshaw speaking, it was interesting to listen to what she has been saying about critical race theory, about the America context, because I come from Southern Africa, from Namibia, which had the same legalized form of apartheid as South Africa. So Namibia was like a fifth province to South Africa. So we were forced to speak a language that isn't ours. So apartheid was applied probably more brutally in Namibia. More people were killed in Namibia by the South African army than in South Africa. The liberation war was fought on the northern part of Namibia, not in South Africa. So listening to what you're talking about in relation to critical race theory and people not wanting the past to be known and growing up in a country where we have about 5% German speaking, white Germans, one Namibians, and we have about, I think it's about 9 or 10% white people. So we're a settler colony. There's white people who came from the West to settle. So black people are in power politically, but economically, the power is still held by many from the settler colonies. The countries that don't have the settler colony narrative, the people who have economic power and not necessarily political power, it goes on ethnic divides. So in Africa, our structural divides are either on a racial basis or on an ethnic basis. But one thing about colonialism and apartheid is that it was as racist as it was sexist. So Afrikaans women had the benefits of apartheid, but they still were discriminated against by their own. So never praise colonialism and white women having it better, because fundamentally their careers, they were allowed to exist, but not really. But listening to you and the sensitivity and people feeling our country is being taken away from us, or our capital is being taken away from us. The scramble for resources makes whoever's new to the table feel like they're taking away from somebody who was already at the table. So that was a little bit of my experience going on, where there were many people who felt I was taking something away, and in a way where there were barriers being placed on me specific, it felt it wasn't about me. It felt sometimes as if we allow this one in, many more will come in, and then we are in danger. So that was the one part on the career part. But I must also admit, and this is my personal experience, I know people who didn't have my experience, but my mentors were white males, simply because there wasn't anyone else in capital markets. We didn't look like each other, we didn't speak the same language, but there was a point I decided there's certain things I'm not going to see, and you're going to mentor me whether you like it or not, because I need to know what you know. And we are close till this day, but it also enabled me to have conversations with them where we could discuss implicit bias. We could discuss biases that they didn't recognize that they had, simply because they allowed me into their lives close enough where we could have frank discussions without immediately accusing each other of something. Because often we immediately start with an accusation, which makes the other person sensitive, and then no discussion can be held. From a personal perspective, as First Lady and as an entrepreneur, I was always told, just ignore it. Don't answer them. And I did that. I kept quiet. I was silent. And it was attack after attack, knock after knock, lie after lie. And at a point I realized, if you are telling me to keep quiet and you are not defending, then I'm going to have to defend myself, because it's true what Audre Lorde says. Your silence does not protect you. It enables the perpetrators of this kind of conduct. So I started to fight back with the pushback that comes when you fight back. Why does he talk so much? Why is he so loud? Why is he so undignified? The other first ladies were so quiet. Why does this one talk so much? And that was in the beginning. Now, nobody attacks me unnecessarily because they've realized this one talks back. But secondly, I think people have come to understand how I think about things, how I react to things. So don't allow yourself to be convinced to be silent when you feel that people are changing the perception of who you believe yourself to be. So being strongly grounded in self is the key. And making sure that there aren't people around you who mess with your confidence, whether it's a friend, it could be a relative, it could be a romantic partner. Don't allow people around you who start to make you question yourself, because that's all you have. I'd rather be wrong than to have people around me convince me, keep quiet, don't do that, don't go there. You're not going to get that, don't apply. So be true to yourself, but have a sense of identity. And I say it because you'll be surprised. People assume as Africans we have a strong sense of identity. There's work to be done there in rebuilding an African narrative where we as Africans recenter what our identity feels and looks like. And it's true for you as well, as an African American. You must recenter and have a strong sense of identity, because there's always people, even within your own community, who will tell you it's something else when you know it's not.
Yes. Thank you.
Yes.
Hello, good afternoon. My name is Erica Calicut from Hampton, Virginia. I'm a first-year MSW student, so I'm with the School of Social Work with plans for advocacy and policy upon graduation. And I first would like to thank you, Her Excellency and Professor Crenshaw, for your conversation today. I guess my question is more so like a part two to what you just shared and how to stay grounded. As a African-American woman, clergy, and also a woman of Trinidadian and Spanish and Indian descent, I find myself at the intersections daily, representing in several spaces of advocacy and just trying to kind of empower my community, running into apathy, and then, of course, running into resistance. And one thing I admire about the women leaders before me is longevity, the longevity that you all have had in your careers. And as a young woman coming into this, my goal is self-preservation. And I want to preserve myself for the fight, for the movement, because I know that this is far beyond a moment in which I understand we have to fight for. So I wanted to hear your words further about how to preserve and self-care during a fight like this that can really, now we're in the age of mental health, burn us out very quickly. So any words that you have as far as what has helped you to preserve yourself in the movement and your context and where you are. Thank you.
You can take that one.
So I pick my battles. You can't fight everything, and you're not going to win everything. And I decide, to me, what's important to me and what I can let go. The second way I self-preserve is I used to be a #1 squash player in my country in my day. And while I can't play squash at that level, I do exercise at least 4 times a week. If I didn't, I'd go mad. I don't eat the way I should. But those small things, doing things that you used to enjoy when you were younger, are so important. Another way of self-care, young people love me because they think I've got time for them, but they don't realize it's cathartic for me to be with them. Just to hear a different perspective, just to hear people who are happy, who are still having fun, who are doing interesting, scandalous things sometimes. But I love it because it makes me distract from what I'm doing. So just joy, finding people and things that give joy. And then the last, sometimes being selfish, being able to say no. And being able to just say, I can't meet you for lunch. Not because I'm washing my hair, I can't. And then the last one is one thing I see. I don't know if it's the same here in America, but I'm seeing a lot of loneliness in young people in Namibia, and just not having deep relationships, connections, people who have your back no matter what, and nurturing relationships, people around you who you can be open with, who you see each other, not on social media, not on Instagram or TikTok or whatever it is, but you spend time together and not around alcohol. You spend quality time together, not at a party. You make time for each other. So there's a number of things that you must do. And also deciding which issues are important. I see young people running, one day it's climate change, one day it's intersectionality, one day it's this, one day it's reproductive health, and it's where the funding lines are, where the most people are. Decide what's important to you. It could be a topic that's not popular, that nobody else is talking about. What is it that affects you and that you are passionate about? And focus on that. And not be part of a group simply because everybody else is on this topic.
Well, every time that question comes up, I have a posse that goes, because I'm not great at that. And so I'm learning, it is one of the things that, young people are reminding me of, because I get that question everywhere I go. And so when I am doing something that for me feels like self-care, I remember to note it. So the next time I get asked that question, I'm like, well, actually what I did last week was this. So in no order of priority, I deeply value rolling with people who roll with me, having a posse. I'm not out here on my own, I'm talking about this stuff. So from my crew at AAPF, those of you who are in the house, say something. All right. So African American Policy Forum, we strategize together, we commiserate together, we party together. There's not a dance party that you can persuade me not to get up and dance at. That's how I get it out of my body, and I love it. It's important to me. And I still am in contact with people who I went to law school with, the folks who did the boycott together. We, pick up the phone, we tweet at each other. It's just, feeling like you are part of a community, to me, is cathartic. It is, I don't really feel as alone as sometimes it appears. And I know they have my back. That makes a lot of difference to me. I consider it self-care. And I'm with you. When I spend time with people, a lot of times they think it's just, oh, isn't she gracious? Like, no, I'm loving being in the company of people where I can see the complexity of life. I see how ideas are circulating. I'm able to figure out what different generations are talking about. I feel that keeps me grounded, that keeps me sane, that keeps me energized.
Great. I love, one of my favorite new self-care things is something that students introduce me to. It's called the nap ministry. And it means that when you have just run out of things to do, just go take a nap. It works for toddlers, it works for leaders, it works for people who are exhausted by the world. Take a 20-minute nap, see how you feel after you wake up. Typically it's better. All right, yes, right here.
Hello, my name is Kendra Wilson. I'm a sociology major and WGSS minor from Long Island, New York, originally from Jamaica. And my question is for both Professor Crenshaw and Her Excellency Jingos. So my first question for Professor Crenshaw is, when you come into the space that you're at as a lawyer, because I also would like to join the law field as soon as I graduate from Howard. How do you stand your ground in spaces where whiteness is seen as the standard and the authority, and how do you bring your idea to the forefront without having it challenged to a point where it's reduced to nothing?
Well, part of what I was saying a little bit earlier is that there is no formula for that. I am in a moment where people are trying to, I wouldn't say so much reduce the ideas to nothing, but completely recode them, redefine them, literally take the words out of your mouth and repurpose them, for their objectives. So there's nothing that prevents them from trying to do that. What's left is what's your response to their attempt to do that. And I totally agree with the First Lady. A lot of people will say, you know, don't stoop to their level, don't respond, but your silence not only will not free you, your silence can sometimes be seen as affirmation. Like, oh, well, you know what, that was a slam dunk. You don't have anything to say to that. Well, actually, I've got a lot to say to that. So my struggle isn't so much whether I will contest the efforts to recode, redefine, misinform, but what platforms are available to do that. So I think the harder part of that is what happens when media and others in the various institutions decide that what you have to say about the misinformation is irrelevant. What's most interesting is the story that they're telling. Oh, controversy, story at 7, and all you see is white parents losing their minds about something, but there's never an opportunity to answer the question about, well, are they losing their mind about something that's real or something that's constructed? So my approach to that is trying to create alternative platforms for us to tell our story. So Under the Blacklight was an alternative platform that we created in the middle of the pandemic because we weren't getting news about what was happening with Black folk and other folk of color. We weren't being able to talk about how disposable, indispensable people actually were being made. So that's an alternative platform. The Unbanned Book Tour is another new platform. So I try to remember in our time when we were able to communicate with each other unfiltered through a gaze that does not have our well-being at the center of their product, what did we have? We had our own media. We had our own means of communication. We had our own platforms. We had our own institutions. I'm in one right now. So that's my goal, trying to figure out how to create the opportunities to reach the audiences that need to hear the message so they can be activated to protect our well-being and our future.
Thank you so much. And my second question was, is a two-part question. Okay, no problem.
Yes, right here. We have time for one last question.
Hi, it's so great to meet you guys. I am so honored to be here. I have just felt like I am on a mission to do something that I feel like is partially out of my reach, I guess. I've been sitting over here on my phone, and I'm sure you guys probably thought, like, what is she doing on her phone? I've been taking down notes because I feel like I've been waiting to be in a room like this. And I feel like maybe the reason why everything has happened in my life was to lead me to this moment. And so this moment means so much to me. And, I'm sorry, I'm getting a little bit emotional, but I guess I feel like I don't come from a background of being around these people who are changing the world. You see what I'm saying? Who are innovating and creating in this way. And to be in a room full of so many of you who are doing that is just so inspiring, because to come from a background where you don't have those innovators, you don't have those entrepreneurs, you know what I'm saying? Like, your parents work, everyday jobs. It's like to be around people who could potentially believe in your vision and see you on your mission and come with you and push you towards that is just amazing. Sorry, let's get back to my question. So I should probably introduce myself. My name is Bria Dean. I am a doctoral student in the physical therapy program. I began my career as a flight attendant, and I didn't find it as fulfilling as I thought. Just because of the ever-changing environment, you're with the new people, new flight attendants, new passengers, constantly changing. So I decided to go into physical therapy because I knew I wanted to work with people and be more hands-on. And so now I'm finding that on this journey of into physical therapy, that my core beliefs are that health and education are of the utmost importance. And so now I'm realizing this while I'm in physical therapy school. And because these things are important to me, I started tutoring because you guys talked about how important education is. And so I started this tutoring company, and now I'm realizing that the tutoring, I think, is more beneficial to the students and more, I guess I feel like now I can bring the information to life with the students. And I feel like I've been on this physical therapy path, but now I feel like I'm hitting this crossroads of, do I continue on this path that I originally set on, or is it more about the destination, or is it more about the journey? And so I say all that to say, I feel like I've realized within this last couple of semesters that I'm an entrepreneur. I know that that's what I'm meant to be. And I guess it's like, do you continue down the road of education, or do you choose your entrepreneurial path, or do you, try to blend the two together?
That's great. All right, what do you think about that when you're maybe in school for something and then you feel pulled perhaps to something else?
I'm the wrong person to ask right now that question. You're actually triggering me because my daughter recently decided she's changing course, she's changing university because she doesn't like what she's studying. So I'm going to give you the same lecture that I gave her. Is that sometimes we must finish what we're busy with and get that and then start something else. Because a challenge I sometimes have is it feels to me that at times young people, when things get hard, you just change direction. And resilience is important. And finishing what you started, not forgetting your passion. And then merging your passion, like what you're doing with young people, with the tutoring part, is really important. And that is a journey. It's not necessarily a destination. But you can mix it with the physical therapy part that you're also passionate about. So rather than being a jack of all trades, get good in something and then build on that to do the other things that you are passionate about and are doing.
Thank you.
Please join me in thanking Professor Kimberly Crenshaw and First Lady, Her Excellency Monica Gangas, for being with us this afternoon.
Now, wasn't that an awesome fireside chat? Yes, it was. Yes, it was. So thank you so much, Professor Crenshaw and Her Excellency. Thank you so much. It has been an awesome day. We have a few more things that we want to do before we conclude our day. So I'm going to kind of give y'all a little bit of a heads up where we're going, since I know we need to stretch our arms and stuff. Yes, you're welcome to some stage. That we're going to, before we conclude, we want to give out 2 awards. And so we're going to have, we're honored to have Judge Janet Nosworthy to come up and to present an award, the GLOW Award. The GLOW Award. Would you come to say? Could y'all please put your hands together as she comes to the front? And we need Professor Crenshaw. And Her Excellency.
I feel exhilarated. I feel as if my heart is full and my heart is singing. As a council member, I feel very, very privileged to be here. And perhaps it's very fitting that in the case of 2 awardees, 2 honorees, one out of Africa proper, from Southern Africa, the other out of the African diaspora, should have another child, or should I say, a very mature child to present the award. And I want to thank you President Frederick, and I want to thank Dr. Duani for inviting me to be a member of the council for the center and the great work that Dr. Duani has done. And it was so wonderful to hear the awardees and the honorees speak from their heart. And they bring passion and dignity and upliftment with all that they do. I don't think that I need to announce them again. You already know them. And I feel as if I know them so much better after today. But it's a pleasure and a privilege for me. The Global Leadership of Women, GLOW Award, is presented by the Center for Women and Global Leadership to a woman leader, or in this case, leaders, who has contributed to global gender awareness and activism. This year, we are delighted to present the award to both nominees, done in recognition of their indefatigable work in the community, fighting against unproductive and unfair practices and policies that impact women, especially in the workforce. And I'm sorry to have to be prompted, but I'm getting declined in the veil of years, and history and time has caught up with me. I remember what happened 60 years ago. Yes, I'm that old, but I can't remember what happened 5 minutes ago. And this morning, both ladies have enthralled and captivated us with their stories and opinions, stoking the fireside chat with embers glowing. The upliftment and empowerment that they personify and bring our audience. Our gender, women within and without the mother continent and her diaspora, is the essence of global leadership of women. Their influence as leaders is far-reaching and extensive globally for both our of national and international proportions. Frankly, I think the two of you are great superstars. I think you're absolutely wonderful, and I'm enriched by you. So without more, because I mustn't overstay my welcome, I'd like to present the awards to you. And of course, we hear a few sweet words from you. So if I might, firstly, Excellency, we are I'm so sorry. I was wrong when I had the opportunity to get it right.
Thank you
If I
so
might,
much.
Professor.
Thank you.
This is so much deserved, and I think we all know it.
Yeah.
It's very special.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. And now the next one to Her Excellency.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. As we continue to celebrate, we want to call to the stage Dr. Joyce Ladner, the formal vice president of one of the formal vice presidents of Howard University. Dr. Ladner.
Thank you very much. I was really, my heart was full, but I have a long history at Howard. I came here in 1971 to teach sociology. I left, I came back in 81 and rose up through the ranks to become vice president for academic affairs, what's called now the provost. Did that for 4 years. Then I was interim president. Had I lived, had it the presidents that come along at this time, I would have been permanent president. These are not sour grapes. But the men on the board never saw me as becoming permanent. I faced a financial crisis. My team and I fixed it. I went on from here to when the District of Columbia went broke. President Clinton appointed me to a 5-member board that restored fiscal solvency to the district. It was called the DC Financial Control Board. So much of the development and so on you see in DC now, the increase in population is due to the fact that we fixed the city, not realizing that it would displace so many poor people at the time. Anyway, I won't take much more of your time, but I became interim president in 1994 and 95. So you can see now, or I can see, the tremendous changes that have occurred in this university and the acceptance of women in higher level positions. And I like to think that I helped to pave that way. So congratulations to Professor Crenshaw, to First Lady Gingos. Dr. Dewani is a delightful person to work with. And so is Dr. Bean. Where's Dr. Bean? And all of the staff is just incredible. Had we not gotten the grant from Mr. Murrin, we would not be where we are today. So I want to give a personal thanks to you and to your wife. Stand up so they can see you. Stand up. Our gifts come in, from different places, and we're mentored by different people. I never had a female mentor. They were all men, but that spoke to the times. Okay, I want now to present how I imagine the future of Black Women's Leadership Award to two students. Students are, of course, the lifeblood of an institution. Will Kaya Phillips come forth? How are you? Kaya is a senior in health sciences major, and she is being honored for her spoken word piece. I want to congratulate you. You remind me of myself when I was your age. All of us have been there, right? And the second award goes to Leha Williams, public relations major and sociology and environmental studies double minor. For your poem, I'm with her. I was pleased to see all these sociology majors because I am a sociologist. Congratulations to you and best wishes to you in the future.
Please put your hands together as you come to the stage.
Thank you, Dr. Bean. Good afternoon to all of you. Wasn't that beautiful and enlightening? It is an honor to be here amongst such brilliance. My name is Selena Justice, and I manage a philanthropic portfolio at Pivotal Ventures called Centering Women and Girls of Color, of which Professor Crenshaw's organization, African American Policy Forum, and this center are partners. Pivotal is an incubation and investment company founded by Melinda French Gates to advance social progress in the United States of America. We do this through high impact investments, philanthropic partnerships, and advocacy in pursuit of our biggest goal to date, a commitment of $1 billion over 10 years, which aims to expand women's power and influence. As the manager of Centering Women and Girls of Color, I work specifically on accelerating investments in women and girls of color to magnify their transformative impact. And that first word in our strategy is key to our approach, and it was hard fought for, centering. Because it is well past time that our needs and our dreams and our intellectual authority and our ancestral leadership are centered in the fight for the equitable and free world that we want for our children. So, the conversation that we were treated to today between First Lady Gengos and Professor Crenshaw, it leads us in this centering of our voices and at this beautiful center. And so it is Pivotal's honor to sponsor this inaugural Global Women's Summit. I know there will be many more to come. Thank you all.
Thank you, Selena. Now, at this time, we're going to have remarks from our very own Dr. DuBrois. This is our Chief Operations Officer. She's coming to the stage. Please put your hands together as she walks to the stage. It's Dr. Tashni DuBrois. I was getting her name together in my head.
No problem, Dr. Bean. I'm glad you got it. Many people don't. So I'm truly grateful for that. Now, I don't think any of us here had any idea what we were walking into when we heard that 3 Black women were going to be on a panel together. But I think we can all say that we were up for the best treat today. And they gave us an education that we could not have paid for. And so I am really grateful to all of you for educating us, and the lessons don't stop here. So we promise that everything that you've taught us today will continue that journey. It turns out that I'm the Executive Vice President and Chief Operating Officer at Howard University, and I've been here for 5 years now. I think, you know, when Dr. Frederick mentions what he came and found and how it is that he's been able to transform this institution, as the women in the senior leadership, on the senior leadership team, we are all grateful for his leadership, because there are times when you will need a man as an advocate, and I think we've all heard that resounding story today. We can't deny that we were schooled. I had to text my admin and ask her to cancel my noon meeting because I had to stay. I needed to stay for this lesson. Let me start by first recognizing the regality of the formidable middle child, the woman king, Her Excellency, Monica Gingos. I would have loved to be at your dinner table when your siblings saw you for the very first time. Because now an entire nation remembers your birthday. Professor Crenshaw, I hope you recognize that you have an army of sisters in infamy. It's the type of mission that Congressman John Lewis described as good trouble. But sister, you are bad. And we love it. Dean Holland-Walker, thank you for being such a capable and spirited moderator. Your leadership at the School of Law is refreshing and always appreciated. Dr. Dawuni, you continue to punch above your weight class, but we know that's because you have a team of people punching with you. The volume of accomplishments you and your team have achieved in a year are exceptionally impressive, but we're not surprised. There's nothing that you can't accomplish. We are early on boarders on the Dawuni bandwagon. So Trustee Mern, President Frederick, and Provost Wuta knew exactly what it is that they were doing. And I encourage all of you who are not on the bandwagon as yet to jump on quickly, not only as cheerleaders, but give her a little bit of gas money every now and again. Part of empowering women requires that all people recognize the overt and subtle ways that these discriminatory cultures thrive. In all systems of human development, we're charged with empowering girls and women to think of ourselves as deserving and fortunate, and to become agents of change in communities, industry, and the global society. This summit is a bold statement on behalf of agent making, an idea that the future of Black women in leadership begins with Black women bolstering the global campaign to defeat stigma at home and beyond or gates. Young women, don't be afraid to walk into any space. You belong. And together, we will deliver on all of the firsts that have not yet been accomplished by us. I believe in the intrinsic power that we have. Walk in that confidence. We didn't come all the way from Africa to lose our grit. We belong. It turns out I did my ancestry DNA over the pandemic. I had nothing to do, apparently. And I learned that my DNA is similar to the DNA of 37% of people that live in the Nigeria region. And then about another 15% Benin, right? And Benin, and then another 12% or so, the Ghanaians. So when I told the provost that you were 37% Nigerian, our provost is from Ghana, he said, why am I not surprised? But this funny little accent is from Jamaica. So our Howard University family is collectively grateful for the team that powers the work of this center and for this convening. Ladies and gentlemen, our esteemed guests, our students, faculty, and staff, thank you so much for your support, and we deeply appreciate your commitment to a better world for all women at large, but for Black women in particular. Please join our journey.